So big news coming out of the Middle East. A ceasefire is finally underway in Gaza after a 4-hour-long delay between Israel and Hamas. There were airstrikes today by Israel carried out in Gaza that killed around 13 Palestinians because of a delay in the implementation of this long-awaited ceasefire. Israel's government said that Hamas had not shared the names of 3 Israeli hostages who were set to be released today. Because of that, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had said that the ceasefire will not go into effect until those names are shared. Therefore, after that, airstrikes were launched. But now what has happened is very clearly that Hamas has shared that information and the ceasefire has gone into effect. This is a ceasefire that much of the world has called for a very, very long time. A ceasefire that India has also welcomed, but it is a ceasefire that faces serious questions about whether this will lead to any lasting peace in the Middle East and in even this conflict between Israel and Hamas. So let's get into the weeds of what exactly is happening, the ceasefire deal that has kicked in, what exactly are the terms of the deal, who exactly is involved, and how exactly will it be implemented, what are the challenges to its implementation. So let's go subject by subject, right? Let's go and begin by what exactly the deal entails. After 15 months of the Israel-Palestine war, the Israel-Hamas war, we have seen a deal that has a 3-phase implementation plan. That is according to a set of documents that have been leaked and have come out, that have been, the authenticity of them has been confirmed. The document basically says that there will be 3 phases to this ceasefire deal. The first phase is supposed to last 6 weeks, 42 days. And the idea is that 33 Israeli hostages, mostly women, civilians, children, etc., will be released. Some will be released, so there will be some hostages released every single day or for several days during this 6-week period, and 33 total hostages will be released. In exchange, Israel will also release several hostages that it has, prisoners that it has taken from Palestinian prisoners that it has taken. So both sides will swap prisoners, including several who are serving life sentences. That is also part of the deal. Another part of the deal is that humanitarian aid will be allowed to enter Gaza, hundreds of trucks of humanitarian aid. That is some of the expectations of the United States. For example, one major backer of Israel has made clear that we want hundreds of trucks of aid to be able to go into Gaza to provide humanitarian aid. Remember that international agencies have said that there is almost a famine-like situation that is playing out right now in Gaza. So prisoner exchanges, humanitarian aid, and also military withdrawal. Part of the idea is that Israeli forces will have to withdraw some of its presence and reduce some of its presence in key strategic areas, for example, like the Philadelphia corridor. That is a narrow strip of land that exists between the Egypt and Gaza border. There is also, so there will have to be some withdrawal taking place there after Israeli hostages have been removed. Of course, the idea is that then there will be a complete withdrawal. As of course some things will also have to happen on the Rafah border and the Rafah border crossing, which again is on the southern side of the Gaza Strip, again between Gaza and Egypt. The Rafah border crossing will also have to be prepared by Israel to facilitate the return of displaced civilians that have fled to Egypt. That is phase 1 of the deal, 6 weeks. So that's a lot to be done in 6 weeks. But then there is phase 2. Now, phase 2 is also going to basically involve another set of prisoner exchanges and a wider set of withdrawals that will have to come from the Israeli side. So, for example, phase 2 will mean the complete Israeli military withdrawal from Gaza. The second and third phases have not yet been negotiated. The second phase will have to be negotiated after 2 weeks of the successful implementation of phase 1. So after weeks and weeks that we are going to see in the next 2 weeks to come, you're going to have 10, 15, 16 days really of this ceasefire deal being implemented, of humanitarian aid being supplied, of prisoner exchanges. Then the two sides will begin negotiation with the help of mediators like the United States, with mediators like Qatar and Egypt. They will come together and basically then ensure that there is some sort of implementation of the deal. So if that deal is properly implemented in phase 1, then 16 days from now, you will have a negotiation for phase 2, right? So the phase 2 has not yet been negotiated, which is an extremely important time, something that needs to be remembered, which makes this deal extremely sensitive. But we'll come back to why there are so many concerns about whether this deal will hold up. Now, after this, you're also going to have more Israeli military withdrawal, the complete Israeli military withdrawal. And then phase 3, of course, is the release of the remains of deceased hostages, as well as the beginning of Gaza reconstruction. So that is a 3-step deal. By the end of phase 2, you're expected to have the Israeli hostages who are remaining, less than 100 hostages by some estimates, to return to Israel. And then you will have the withdrawal of Israeli military forces. It's not exactly clear how exactly that will happen, what exactly the mechanics will be. That is another problem with this deal, which we will get into in a minute. But also that phase 3, then the return of the remains of deceased hostages, as well as some plan for a day after, which is something that you will hear a lot. What is the plan for the day after the Israeli withdrawal? How will Gaza be rebuilt? So that is what is happening at this point in time. So we are just right now at the beginning of phase 1. And now that this has been agreed to, how is it going to be implemented? Well, the idea is Qatar's Prime Minister indicated that there will be some implementation and monitoring of the deal out of Cairo, which is, of course, the capital of Egypt. Egypt, of course, being one of the major powers that has helped mediate this ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Of course, we also have the United States, where President Donald Trump is set to take office. And we also have Qatar, which has been a major negotiator of this particular deal. Now, why exactly did this deal happen now? Well, we've been tracking some of the reporting and writing around this. And of course, one of the major theories that has come out is that really Israel accepted this ceasefire deal. A version of this deal, of course, was proposed by President Joe Biden in May last year, in May 2024. But the key operative factor was that Israel's geopolitical position has improved considerably in the recent weeks and months. Of course, the fall of the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria was a positive development from the Israeli perspective. Israel has, of course, been on the offensive on its Syrian border, and of course, its decimation of Hezbollah in the last couple of months has also been total. And you've also had the deaths of several leaders of Hezbollah, which is, of course, a militant group backed by Iran that has a great deal of control over Lebanon, which again shares a border with Israel. So that's what you're seeing right now, which is that Israel's geopolitical position has improved. Therefore, it has felt in a stronger position to sign a ceasefire deal, because Israel does not seem like it is signing an agreement from a position of weakness. Another point, of course, is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is set to take office as President of the United States tomorrow, January 20th. And what we know is that his administration and his administration that is coming into power, and of course his special envoy for Middle Eastern affairs, Steve Witkoff, he has been doing the rounds in the Middle East, talking to the Israelis, and has told the Israelis effectively to accept the deal that has been made by the Democratic administration. So what we're seeing is that the outgoing Democratic administration of Joe Biden and the incoming administration of President-elect Donald Trump has worked fairly closely together to make sure that this deal is done. And of course, what I have been hearing personally from people who know the region much better than I do, as well as people who cover the region for decades, their basic view is that Benjamin Netanyahu accepted the deal also because he could say to the Israeli public that Donald Trump is coming into office, our relationship with the United States is important, and therefore I had to accept this deal. I was made to do this. And I was effectively forced to do this, which will be a powerful argument for people back home in Israel. Now, those are the specifics of the deal. This is exactly how the deal came to be. But the question is, what are the challenges to this deal? Well, one of the major problems seems to be that how staggered the deal is. Remember, I said that phase 1 is going to begin now. Hostages are going to have to be released by both sides, day in, day out, from both sides. And then after that, you will have another series of negotiations for phase 2, which is about Israeli security. Now, at any point in the next 2 weeks and even further beyond that, this agreement can break down entirely. It is not entirely clear whether there is a great deal of support in Israel. There is, of course, support in Israel for bringing the hostages back. But for example, in the government of Prime Minister Netanyahu, he has several very conservative ministers, very hawkish ministers who help prop up his government, who have made a part of his majority in parliament, in the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, and they have made very clear that they do not want to see an agreement that will see Israel's national security diminished. They want to take the offensive to Hamas. They want to continue the fighting, and their view is that they have implicitly threatened in some cases to resign from the government, which could topple Netanyahu's government, and that is something that the Israeli Prime Minister might be reluctant to do. So that is a domestic problem in Israel. There are also questions about whether more radical groups in Hamas and other Palestinian groups will be willing to adhere to this deal with Israel. There is any number of possibilities of these of various political factions within Israel, within Hamas, and within Gaza of derailing this agreement. So that is one major risk. Simply put, that there are factions that do not want to see this deal happen. And because of how staggered the deal is, because it's going to take place over 6 weeks, because constantly hostages will need to be released, and that makes this deal extremely vulnerable. It could break down at any given point in time. That is a serious concern. Remember, as I said, phase 2, which is the complete Israeli withdrawal from Gaza, has not yet been negotiated. So that is going to be a serious concern, because people in Israel do not want another repeat of what happened on October 7th. You would recall that October 7, 2023 is when the attacks happened on Gaza, happened on Israel. There was, of course, attacks by Hamas that killed over 1,000 people in Israel. Of course, this was a shocking attack, and the view in Israel is that they never want this to happen again. And therefore, if there is an Israeli military withdrawal, what will be the terms? Will there be a military buffer zone? What will withdrawal look like? Will Hamas be able to regroup? Because you will recall something, if you haven't seen this yet, let me remind you that outgoing Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who has been Secretary of State for the last 4 years, has been closely involved in these negotiations, actually came out and said in one of his farewell speeches that Hamas has been able to recruit soldiers in such a way that it has almost replenished its fighter corps, its fighter cadre, that Israel had previously succeeded in depleting. So the interesting thing is that Hamas is, according to the Secretary of State of the United States, almost back to its pre-war military strength. Now, what the quality of these troops is, etc., we will of course bring our top defense experts and people who have studied militias and Hamas in the Middle East. We bring them to explain it to you. But the idea is, on paper, what the Secretary of State is saying is that you wanted to diminish Hamas, you wanted to break down its ability to recruit, but in fact, it has continued to recruit. And if you leave, if Israel withdraws, then what does that mean for Hamas and its ability to push back, and its ability to reorganize, and its ability to retake control over Gaza, and then at some point in the future launch another strike on Israel? So that's another big reason why people are not convinced that this agreement will hold up, because Hamas has, according to the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, managed to regroup, managed to recruit more soldiers. So what happens now? Will Israel be willing really to withdraw from parts of Gaza that it has won over the last 15 months in order to give that control back to Gaza, back to Gazan authorities, and back perhaps to Hamas? So there is a serious national security concern here for Israel that, if it is not met, will mean that phase 2 of the agreement will probably not go through. That is a serious concern. What the level of comfort will be in President Donald Trump's administration to push both sides is also going to be a serious concern. How Donald Trump will approach key questions like the normalization of Israel's relationship with Saudi Arabia. Will he push the Israeli government to give a longer-term solution to the crisis? For example, Antony Blinken, again, the outgoing Secretary of State, said that the Palestinians will not accept a situation in which they are a people without a nation, that they are treated with no national rights. That's what he said, which is a very, very direct form of criticism against the Israeli government. Unfortunately, it is unclear how sympathetic Donald Trump's administration is to the Palestinian cause. Everything that we have seen so far, including the choice of Ambassador, former Governor Mike Huckabee, who is a very, very pro-Israel voice, makes it clear that the Donald Trump administration is one that is likely to be significantly pro-Israel, and therefore this is not likely to see an outcome that in the long term might produce a breakthrough that will allow the emergence of a Palestinian state and perhaps provide a reasonable long-term solution to the conflict. But these are some of these serious concerns that have been raised about the about this ceasefire deal that has been reached, that has gone into effect today, how phased it is, how vulnerable it is, how many things have to go right for it to work, and how few things have to go wrong for it to completely fall apart, how Hamas is still seems to be intact, seems to still retain its ability to recruit. And of course, I was listening to a panel discussion from some very top American experts on the Middle East, and their view was that, look, over the next weeks and months, what you're going to see is that more and more Israelis are going to be released hostages. They're going to bring harrowing stories of abuse, of deaths of fellow hostages, of what they have gone through, and that is going to lead to a serious increase in public anger in Israel for what has happened to them over the last 15 months. And that anger and that horror among Israeli society could very much diminish some of the impetus or the goodwill that may have needed to be generated for a deal on a long-term deal on Gaza, because their stories of harrowing abuse will effectively make Israeli society more hawkish and very, very angry about what will happen. So it was an interesting point, and I thought I should share it with you because it's definitely something that, again, is one of those barriers in the way of this deal actually proving to be something that is very, very positive long run. Regardless, there has been a positive global reaction to the implementation of the ceasefire deal. India, of course, welcomed it. The UN Secretary General said that it was a critical first step in moving things forward on Israel and Hamas. The European Union has welcomed it. America, of course, has welcomed it. Turkey, Lebanon, Australia, Japan, South Africa, all of these varying countries have welcomed what has happened in this ceasefire deal. There is international support for something to be worked out as a viable long-term deal, but as I pointed out, there are serious concerns about whether that can really take place. We're going to feature a number of top experts on the Middle East, both from India and abroad, in the coming days, weeks, and perhaps we will have another couple of interviews for you just today on the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, what that means for Gaza, and how durable this deal will prove to be. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global, and we will keep you absolutely updated on this story.